Yes, thanks so much. It was when I was at a meeting in New York for the Commission on the Status of Women, and I met some Latin American women who had developed a radio soap opera which had been broadcast in several Latin American countries, and they had hundreds of thousands of listeners who would listen to the stories of women in their preparations for floods and disasters, because in many countries we know that each year there will be disasters, and we know roughly about when that season is. So the idea of actually bringing a medium that women don't have to leave the house for. It's something, the radio is something that happens in the house, and many women have it on all day, especially around the time that they're cooking. And these, after the radio shows, they then had women working talking in small discussion groups about what they could do. And having been in Vietnam, I thought, well, the Voice of Vietnam actually gets to almost everybody in the country, and the Vietnam Women's Union have 15 million members, so everywhere in the country there is the ability to bring women into small discussion groups with the Vietnam Women's Union, and we have floods every year as well. So I thought this seems to be a really useful model for us in the country. So we took the scripts in Latin American, translated them directly to Vietnamese, and then workshopped them with local women. And they changed the stories so that they really fitted their context. We made sure we had people doing the radio broadcasts with the particular accent of the province that they were in, and it's been fantastic. We have, for the last 3 years, we've been able to air it, and then when the women get together, they develop their own household and community action plans. And we give them first aid training, and now we will also be giving swimming lessons, because the majority of people who die after disasters are women, because they're either waiting for the taking care of the boys and the girls or the elderly, and a lot of the women don't know how to swim. And it was interesting. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and I asked the people, how many of you know how to swim? And I would say, about 5% of women put their hands up, and I said, how many of your children know how to swim? And more boys knew how to swim than girls. So we will be starting swimming lessons for women and girls. And it's been a very exciting project, because the women have taken it to in different directions and in different ways than even we had thought. They've actually taken the radio show into role plays that they do in the community, and because it's all women, some of the women will dress up as men, and everyone in the community hall will be in stitches of laughter, and they're really enjoying the lessons that they're learning as well. And they now have these green groups where they get together and they work out how they can clean up the neighbourhood, and it really has been an amazing inspiration. So before the project, in the provincial committees for storms and flood control, there was not one woman on one of those provincial committees in the whole country. Now, having worked in 2 provinces, each of those have a woman on the committee, and we are working with the Women's Union to try and get agreement for there to be a Women's Union representative on the committees for floods and storm control in the whole country. And with that, we are then giving the women more information and more training, and trying to bring them up from the grassroots level to actually dialogue in the national discussions for climate change. Because as you can see from discussions here, a lot of the senior negotiators are men, and we don't hear women's voices strongly enough. And it is very important that, these are the women who, in many cases, they're seen as the victims, the ones who are most affected and most vulnerable, but they should also be seen as the change makers, the people who can make the decisions, because they have so much information on the local conditions. So we really want to change the image of women from victims only to also as decision makers and change makers in their communities.
Right, and from what you've been saying, women obviously very much involved in the aftermath of these crises.
Yes.
But traditionally, for those of us who don't know Vietnam, have women's voices been heard in the past? Are women listened to? Are the men? Women are obviously know what they're talking about. They know what they're doing, but the men presumably have not been listening.
It's really interesting. One of the things that we get the women to do when we start is to do vulnerability mapping, and we get the white sheets out and the big markers. And sometimes when I go into communities, like if we invite women and men together, it's very different because you get very different maps. And the men will actually take over in the group. And there was one group, and I said, why don't you take the pen? And she said, I've never held one of those pens before. So it was quite intimidating for them. So now we meet with the women alone, and they actually come up with quite different maps because they know where the track that the kids go to school, they know where they get the water, they know where the firewood is. Whereas for the men, it's kind of the road that they use to get to the market and to their workplace or whatever. So very different types of information, both really essential, but we need to put them both together. So in answer to your question, women obviously know a lot about their communities, but it often is not brought into the decision making. So if you look at the provincial councils and district councils, they're predominantly led by men and predominantly women's issues. Predominantly women are missing from the process. So it is really essential that we make sure they're in there.
And in general terms, are the men receptive to this increased voice, this stronger voice that women have? Are they accepting them onto the committees, listening to them now that the women are speaking with more confidence?
It varies, I have to say, and it varies from person to person and place to place. And you will find that a lot of the statistics for decision making are higher for the majority group in Vietnam, the Kin, and for ethnic minorities even lower still. And so it's even harder in some areas. There are openings, but it is taking time. I think the new generation has very different ways of operating than previously, but I do think it is slow. It's interesting because Vietnam often quotes itself as having one of the highest rates of women in decision making in the Asia region, and it does. But it has actually been slowly declining. And in difference to other countries, it also has almost, well, it was 25%, it's now down to 20%. But the representation at the national level is higher than the local level. And in most countries, it's the other way around. Women get active in local politics and then slowly move up to national. But it's very much a centralised government, so it has been a different process there.
Right. And what now? How do you build on the work that you've done so far? Where does it go from here?
It's really exciting to be here at COP18, I have to say, because I've been talking to people about what we do and listening to what they do, and we have 3 countries who really want to take what we've been doing and actually start to trial it there. So we know that Pakistan and Bangladesh and Tanzania have all said, well, maybe we can try this as well. So I'm really excited that we can have this dialogue, a South-South dialogue between women in their communities who might be so different culturally, but they have to deal with floods and disaster every year, and those issues do not change for women. Women face exactly the same issues in families all around the world.